Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Generations podcast. My computer problems are almost done. I am not able to get my mic working yet, but my computer will not be crashing today. At least I hope not, because it's 3 hours old. But more importantly, today myself and Alex are here to talk to you about Star Wars, The Bad Batch, Season 3, Episode 9, and most importantly, for all of you who are wondering what in the world it was that we kept not wanting to say because it was in the trailers, Asajj Ventress is back.
She's back.
Oh, what was it like for you seeing her?
I kind of expected after last week's episode that we get her. But we weren't at no point were we sure what kind of context we would get her in. And just seeing her, I don't know, it was a very subtle portrayal of her. Like there was nothing over the top, nothing aggressive, like very just calm. But it was cool to see her kind of how I pictured her in some of the later of the Dark Disciple book, like a little more calm demeanor, kind of have come to terms with a lot of her demons, and it was just a very different but like very like well welcomed depiction of her.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I definitely think that it does seem like a lot of what we read about in the Dark Disciple. We don't know how much of the plot of it has happened, but definitely this is not her at the end of the Clone Wars. This is some development has happened, some changes have happened. I do want to say a quick thing for those of you who have not read the Dark Disciple novel yet. We actually did do a full episode on it. We keep mentioning it because it's a novel that was written some time ago, but it's about Asajj Ventress after she has done all the things she does in the Clone Wars TV show. And it's a great story. I don't want to give anything away, but it involves some major character development. And the creators of The Bad Batch have said that the ideas of that book are definitely going to be reflected in this. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, I definitely recommend reading the whole book or listening to it. If you want to get our coverage on it, you can become a member of the podcast. The information is right up on here. For just $5 a month, $55 a year, you get access to all the bonus content that we put at the end of every episode. You get access to the full bonus episodes, like the one we did on that book. We've done some on some other books as well. And most importantly, you get to help support the podcast. The computer that I bought was the membership fees we are getting was a big help towards making that happen. But more is always good. There's a lot of work that goes into making these podcasts happen. $5 a month is a great way to do that. And of course, there is also all the ways to contact us. Let us know what you think of the podcast and talk to us. But okay, back to this. I have to say, first of all, we talked about last week that we thought it was going to be Asajj Ventress, but we didn't know in what context. Mm-hmm. And I am really glad that we didn't spend a long time wondering what her motives were, or with her originally going against them, but then having to work with them. Basically, it was, she's here to work with them. She's going to be cagey for the sole purpose of giving us a really wonderful looking animated fight scene, which I think there was no reason for the fight, but it gave us an incredible fight scene, so I'm mostly okay with that. But then it was just very clear she's here, and she's here to help Omega figure out what this M count stuff is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, I know, Matthew, that we've talked in the past about how, like, you weren't super excited about, Omega being Force sensitive. And, like, as I watched this episode, I don't know, I kind of went back and forth. I kind of was seeing your side of it more, in that, like, I was like, I don't know if I need Omega to be Force sensitive. Like, I'm just kind of like, I'm not, like, upset about it per se, but it's just, like, to me, it doesn't feel like a necessity. Like, I think there'd be enough of a motive if, like, the clones found out, oh, like, some of the Jedi we worked with are trapped on Tantis, or, like, our brothers are there. Like, that's why we have to save them. Like, or maybe Omega is a key some other way. I don't know. Like, it just feels like they're setting us up for Omega to kind of the classic, like, end of Mandalorian season 2, like Omega leaving the father figures to go train, whether it's with Ventress or someone else. Now I will say, if we get a spinoff show of Ventress training Omega, I'll eat my words. If I get like a show of Ventress and Omega, I will be a very happy person. I don't know. What did you think about that?
I think I'm where you are. I think, well, there's a couple things here for me. Yeah. First of all, we're now in what we know, the second half of what we know is the last season. Mm-hmm. I didn't want Omega to become a Force user and have that take over the show, because I really like shows that aren't about Force users. And because it is happening so late, and because what I think is a great both strategic and plot decision, although you feel bad about it, Asajj lies to Omega.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to, the second half of it isn't going to be the Asajj and Omega show. I think there's absolutely no way in the world it doesn't become that by the end of the show. And I think you're right. We might well get a Asajj and Omega spinoff. We might well get a Omega and somebody else spinoff. I keep pointing out to people, remember that the more people who we find are confirmed like Force users and able to do great things with the Force during this period, you have to get rid of them by the time of the Galactic Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So don't get too attached to them, because they're probably going to get hunted down by Inquisitors and die. And I will insert a moment here. Erin would be very upset if I said that, and I apologize to Erin, even though she's not here. I mean, I don't love that idea, but yeah, I kind of feel like I'm okay with where they're going with it. I liked Asajj showing up what she showed up as. I will say that it feels like Asajj is going to drop out. Like, it feels like she was just here for this one episode, and maybe she'll be back at the end.
That's what I was actually about to ask you, because I got the same vibe, and I was like, I would be a little disappointed, I think, if they threw her in here just for this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not like, not that I'm not happy to see Asajj Ventress. She's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars, but I feel like to bring her back, like to break canon, basically, to break book canon, and bring her back for this one single episode, just for her to offer some advice to Omega, would feel kind of, I don't know, just sloppy a little bit. I feel like she needs to come back to some. I don't know if she has to like have a huge role, but like at least one more appearance, whether it's helping on Tantus or like I don't know, something. But I feel like she has to show up at some point. But I also got the same vibe of, was that it? She's just gone.
Well, and like I said, I imagine she'll be back by the end.
Yeah.
And I really wonder what they're planning to do with her next. And let me first say this and get it out of the way. I think one of the things that is happening here is that we are having trouble evaluating a show on its own merits because of something that the show writers probably don't have much control over, which is the marketing. Because certainly I will say, and for those of us who have heard us talk about this before, I think we talked about it some, especially last episode, but in the kind of spoilery section, that I was getting to the point where I was feeling frustrated that they had teased Asajj coming in the trailer, but had then waited so long and given us a couple of like, maybe it's going to be her moments. By the time she showed up today, I didn't have a, oh my God, it's Ventress moment. I was like, oh, okay, she's here finally. That's cool. To me, it feels like bad writing. I have to acknowledge, though, I think if they hadn't marketed it that way, I think if really we'd all been surprised to see Asajj Ventress in this, we'd be going nuts. We'd be feeling like, who cares? It's only for one episode. We're getting Asajj Ventress for one episode.
But that's the other thing. It's one. If it's one episode after putting her in the trailer, it feels like why do that? Why ruin that for us? Why not just have it be a reveal? We enjoy it, and then we're not expecting her to have a much larger role. I feel like if you put someone in the trailer, she has to be some bit of a larger player, in my opinion.
Right. Well, especially because, it's one thing for characters who have their own stories and are doing their own thing to just show up for an episode. Ahsoka was able to show up for an episode or two of Mandalorian because we knew where she was going. She had other things to do. I don't want to get too into the details, but a slight spoiler for Dark Disciple, it doesn't make sense in canon for her to be doing this at this point in the story. I'm just going to say it that way. And again, check out Dark Disciple, great book. I think we did a great episode on it. Please check that out. Become a member. So it also feels like you can't just drop her in. You have to tell me more about Does this mean that Dark Disciple didn't happen? Does it mean that it is happening just in a different time frame? And again, we might see a lot more of her.
Well,
but it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just, can I put like a spoiler warning, skip the next 2 minutes down real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so hard spoiler warning. If you don't want the end of Dark Disciple spoiled for you, please skip ahead a minute or two. Okay, you've been warned. The end of Dark Disciple, Ventress dies. And she makes a comment at the end of this episode before she leaves saying, "I'm not out of lives yet." And I thought that was a very like kind of cheeky way of the writers saying like, we're aware that something has happened to her, but somehow she's still here. I don't know if that was literal, like she actually came back to life, or if they're like saying that was just like a joke. I don't know. Did you interpret that anyway?
I wasn't sure. And just to say one thing for those who didn't mind being spoiled but are still listening, part of the point is that book takes place entirely during the Clone Wars. It is Dooku who kills Ventress. So at this point in the story, by the Bad Batch, Dooku is dead, and we're long past that. That's why this doesn't make sense. If it's just a cheeky line, I'm going to be a little annoyed by it. I hope that it's going to be further explained. I mean, we don't exactly know what species she has. Maybe she regenerates, like she's a Time Lord or a cat. I don't know. It'd be interesting to explore.
A cat Dathomiri witch.
Here's the other thing. Keep in mind, in Ahsoka, we did see a whole lot of thing about the Dathomiri being able to play with death. So that's a possibility. But I just, and again, maybe this is my fault. I just shouldn't have watched the trailer. And so those people who aren't bothered by this, like, feel free to laugh at me. I want to be spending this time being super excited that she's here and wondering what's going to happen next. But instead, it feels just like, so yeah.
I agree.
Putting that aside, though, I did think it was awesome to see her show up. You, I think, like this stuff more than I do. So what did you think of the fight scene?
I think that I agree that it didn't feel like necessary, and I was a little anxious that like it was going to be like very like I don't know, like it was going to take up most of the episode. But I also think like canonically, like it makes sense. Like the clones were fighting the separatists. Like they're aware that they wouldn't not be aware of Ventress being like a separatist war criminal, and they would not be aware that like Ventress had helped Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, or that she had like been trying to turn a new leaf. Like I don't think they would know that. Right. But I think that like. For me, like it was cool to see like the them all fight with their hands, like very martial arts style. That was fun, but I think it was kind of again, it would have been cooler if the trailer hadn't ruined it. Like it was cool to see her pull out a yellow lightsaber, but I already knew that was going to happen because of the trailer. Like we had never seen her use anything but her 2 red blades, and even in the book, she was using 2 red lightsabers. So like at any point in Star Wars canon, and to see her pull out a yellow lightsaber in that moment, I would have like lost my mind. I'm like, oh my god, she's like put away. Like what happened to her lightsabers? Why are they gone? Like she's given them up after never giving them up. And I actually might lend more credence to the idea that like she was reborn, like the events of the Dark Disciple did happen, and she was able to be reborn. Right. That's why she doesn't have her sabers anymore. Like I don't know. It's that part was cool, but again, it just didn't have the same like weight that it would have if I hadn't already known about like.
That's fair. I was trying to get us past talking about the trailer, but that's fine.
Sorry. Yeah.
and I will say, like in terms of the reason for the fight, she was being incredibly. I didn't think so, because to me it felt like she was being incredibly cagey about why she was there. They were being like, "Why are you here?" And she was like, "Well, if she just said, I've turned into Leaf. I'm here to help Omega. I want to work with you guys," I don't think it becomes a fight. And she said that after the fight.
I don't know if I don't think it bothered me as much, because I think that like, one, Ventress has always been very coy and playful, even when she was working for Dooku. Like she was always like kind of very cagey and coy like that. And also, I mean, I want to give her I'm going to give her a smidge of credit in that, she was told by Fennec to show up here, but she doesn't know these people. She doesn't know the clones. She knows the clones don't trust her. And like, she also definitely has an extreme amount of her own trauma from that war, that like probably bubbles up in the moments like that. So I'll give her the benefit of the doubt on that one, but I do see where you're coming from, and that like, if she had just straight up been like, I'm here because Fennec asked me to, I just want to test Omega, like I'm not your enemy, like To be honest though, Matthew, like, do you think that if she said that to the clones, they would have believed her?
No, that's fair. I think they could have set it up a little bit, but you've actually convinced me a lot more that what she did made sense. So yeah, I'm good with that then.
Yeah.
And I will say, for me, even as someone who doesn't normally like animated fight scenes, like I mean, I know it's weird to talk about action stuff all the time. It was an amazing fight scene. Like I thought it
cool.
was really good. It really highlighted each of the Bad Batch's particular fighting style and how easily she was able to read that and overcome them. And it really just showed that she is completely a class above all of them. And I just loved also all the stuff she did to very casually but completely change the term so that it was never lethal damage. You know, ripping their guns out. Hunter pulls a knife and she just does.
And like visually, it was also cool, like seeing her like character redesign. Like, you know, in a on screen format, we've only ever seen her in like either her like kind of Sith assassin robes or like bounty hunter attire. And she's still kind of wearing bounty hunter attire, but it's very different. It almost it like resembles like a like Mandalorian type armor. It's not Beskar, clearly. Maybe it is. I don't know, but it doesn't look like Beskar. But like, you know, with the shoulder plate, with some insignia on it. I don't know what insignia represents. But in general, like I liked her design. Seeing her with hair.
Yeah, we've never seen her with hair before.
Never seen her with hair before. When she was under the water and all like stuck up, that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So like I think overall, like I'm feeling happy to finally seen her, and it almost feels like a weight off my shoulders because every episode I've been waiting for this to happen, and now that it's here, I think that like we've seen everything that's been in that trailer. So now like uncharted waters, which actually gets me really excited about the rest of the season because I just won't know what's coming. But
so like for me, the lesson is I'm just going to go back to not watching trailers.
That's fair.
I think I would be enjoying this so much more if I hadn't seen that.
No, that's so fair.
Especially with you and Aaron being like, well, but it hasn't happened yet. And I'd be like, I don't care. You know, we'll see.
Moving off interest. Sorry, you go. You something?
Well, I was going to say one or two more things about her.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Because again, I just want part of the other thing I think that's interesting in all this is, and that I do hope they address soon, is that one of the things that happens in the book, I don't think this is a very broad, no specific spoiler, but if you really want to preserve it, skip ahead 30 seconds. In the book, there's a lot of talk about her moving away from being purely on the dark side, but also that she's kind of trying to find a middle place in some ways of like, can you use the dark side as some of the power you draw on without being utterly consumed by it? And I'm very curious where they're going to show her with that, because certainly there's that beautiful scene where, you know, you've heard me rant that I'm really sick of, particularly this show, but a lot of the Star Wars stuff, our characters go into a space where a large animal happens to live and then kill the large animal because it's threatening them, because it's just defending its territory or it's young. Like, just leave the damn animals alone, stop killing them. So I was getting kind of annoyed at that, but I was really happy when Ventress did this beautiful thing of like, wait, no, don't kill it. Let me just be at peace with it so it's no longer aggressive and it'll leave us alone again, which is very, like, that's not the dark side at all. And so I thought that alone was a beautiful way of showing wherever she is, she's definitely not just like full on dark side the way she used to be.
Yeah. She remained very calm, but she also did show, like, using the force choke on Wrecker in that fight, like there is still some influence of the dark side, but it was very controlled. It was a very controlled version. And I know it's Legends now, but the yellow lightsaber, like, you know, used to represent, like, you know, I mean, maybe it's canon, I don't know, Jedi Sentinels. And like, you know, the idea of what the yellow lightsaber, you know, for a while represented like the idea of a gray Jedi or a Jedi Sentinel, or like the folks kind of in the middle. And I think in the more canon side of things, you know, the Jedi Temple guards would use yellow lightsabers, and it's more representative of that like middle ground and like protector side. You know, Rey has one at the end of episode 9, and I think that's another like kind of telling sign of where she's at. I think they really put a lot of care into her design, which I really appreciated, to like show what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do just want to say, by the way, I do not agree with the idea that a force choke is by definition the dark side, because among other things, Luke Skywalker
I knew this was coming.
The Gamorrean guards. And this is a larger concept that I have in general of like, I think if you are fighting people, with the intent to disable them or possibly kill them because they are attacking you, like you should be doing it for defense. But force pushing them into a wall to knock them unconscious or force choking them till they're unconscious, I don't see why there's a difference.
So, you got sorry, go ahead.
I'll give a more extreme example, which longtime listeners to this podcast have heard me say before. Ezra is fighting with people who are in an ATST walker shooting at him. He could use the force to push the thing off if he had enough force strength. I don't think he did at that point. Or he could use the force to mind control the guy so that he causes the thing to be destroyed. Or he could just destroy it some other way. Any of those options, the guy is dead, the ATST is being destroyed, and the people the ATST is actively shooting at are no longer being actively shot at.
So
why in the world is one on the dark side and the other aren't?
Okay, I have a strong opinion on this actually, and I think this could be a whole episode by itself. But I think that it comes down to, and this is going to be like a more extreme example as well. But I think that when it comes down to it, like, yes, the end result is the same, but like choking someone to death versus like pushing them off a cliff where like, it'll be an instant death, or like shooting them, or like a lightsaber through the heart, or beheading, like, I understand it's all death, but like I think that at a certain point, like choking, like asphyxiation is torture. And I think that the use of that is more dark side because, it is a much more drawn out process of killing someone. Because oftentimes we're not seeing them like, pick them up, snap a neck, and you're done. Like, which they're capable of doing, but dark side users hold it. And they like take, I think joy and pleasure in watching that happen.
But wait, neither Luke nor Ventress used the force choke to kill.
You are correct. I will say though, I do believe, and I mean, I'm not freaking George Lucas, so this is just my speculation. I believe that Luke using the force choke in episode 6 was intended, just like him wearing all black, to kind of lend the idea of, will he turn to the dark side? Like, it was meant to be like, here is something Luke is doing that's not like, doesn't seem very typical of like a good person. Like a good person wouldn't choke someone. And obviously, we don't know how that turned out. Like, he was never going to turn to the dark side, but like that was a legitimate theory of at the time that like that could happen. Yeah. And I know there was even I think an ending written where he did turn to the dark side. And so I think that from my perspective of the Force and of Star Wars, outside of like Luke and Ezra, I don't believe, and Anakin obviously becomes Darth Vader. We don't see a Jedi using force chokes. We don't like it's seen as like a moment of like, I don't know, a moment of darkness that like a Jedi might have to overcome. And when Ezra does that, I think that's his darkest moment. And that's also in that period where he's using the Sith holocron and it's 100%. Like flirting with the dark side. So like, I'm not saying that, that like it is for sure like Dark Side 101, but I think that using a force choke, at least in the context of Star Wars, is meant to signify like some level of tapping into the dark side.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And like I said, I think that could be one of the most interesting parts of Asajj Ventress's character, is if she is still willing to tap into the dark side. Because I think you are right that the Jedi, particularly of the prequel era, believe this idea of like, you have to fight honorably and things like this.
Yes.
Which I think is incredibly dumb. Like, I think fighting is dumb and you shouldn't be fighting. But if you're gonna fight, if you're attempting to save other people's lives, and the longer it takes to stop this person hurting people means that they will hurt more people, throw your honor out the absolute window. Like,
it's funny.
Win the fight as fast as you can. So and if that means mind control, do it.
So you agree with Tarkin from the Clone Wars when he said to Anakin, like, the Jedi don't go far enough to win fights, and we often lose because you have peacekeepers leading a war. And I think that goes back to, it gets me all excited, Matthew, because this goes back to the grand scheme of Palpatine. Basically, like, he knows the Jedi won't break their code, and those who do are seen as traitors or bad people and are excommunicated or punished. And it just causes infighting, and he tears down the Jedi because they're so stubborn about their damn code.
Yeah, I think that they're too rigid and too brittle. And I think that's kind of what they are. To me, the issue shouldn't, and to be clear, like, there are rules of warfare and conflict in terms of like, not attacking civilians, and not using like starvation or things like that as tactics of war. I'm all for that. I'm just saying, if the end result is killing someone else, getting into the nitty gritty of like you do it this way, you do it that way, feels so ridiculous to me.
I get it.
And to me, I think it's always been something I disliked about Star Wars is that they were so much on this the purity of the it's one thing that's funny is they never actually named the non-dark side. It's the light side, I guess. But like I don't think any character has ever, and I think part of it's because we've mostly only heard from Jedi who think there is the Force, which is the real, and then the dark side, which is the corruption. They don't talk about it as two equal sides.
Until Luke does in episode 8 when he's training Rey. He doesn't like say light side directly, but he does say, like powerful light, powerful dark. And
Right.
he like talks about like and I think that Luke, and my favorite part about Luke's character as a whole is that he does realize that and see that, and it's like we can't be rigid. And like, that when he fell into the rigidity, that's when he failed. And that like, you have to accept. And I think the most honestly, if you look at it, obviously, Anakin went too far. Absolutely. And but like Anakin and Luke and a little bit of Rey and even Ezra, like, those are the Jedi that tapped into both sides, and they became some of the most powerful Jedi that we've seen on screen. I mean, Ezra, like, maybe not Ezra as much. Ezra's his own goofy self, but in general, when Force users are able to use the dark and the light and not lose their sense of self and not be consumed by the darkness and not fall into the rigidity of the light, they become really freaking powerful. I mean, like, it feels like for years we've just kind of floated around that concept of the gray Jedi without ever naming it that or like really getting into the nitty gritty of that, which is fine.
Well, I think the Great Jedi took it in a specific direction that is really problematic in a lot of ways.
I agree.
But no, I do want to make sure that you acknowledge that because you're talking about all these Jedi who became really powerful. When Anakin started, I think Anakin, if you call it Force users, Anakin's on that list. But by the time Anakin was using that much of the dark side, and also I would say Anakin, like, to me, part of that example is that some of them were able to touch the dark side without being consumed by it. Anakin is very much not that. Anakin is the person who got consumed by it. And I think that's where it becomes an interesting calculus, because if you say to me, okay, we're going to have 10 people and we're going to give all of them a chance to increase their power level by like 15%. But there's a 1 in 5, actually probably more like a 3 in 5 chance that they're going to turn all the way to the dark side and become genocidal maniacs. Like, obviously the math doesn't work. And that math is not, as we've seen a number of examples of people who could touch the dark side. And to me, it's the kind of thing where it's like, I think extreme cases sometimes call for extreme measures. And
fair.
That sounds really bad. I want to acknowledge that. And again, like, I'm not at all justifying war crime or anything like that. I'm let me also say, every time you say something like, look, I know Anakin did bad things, but I always brace myself. So we've had a couple
Okay. I just want to point out real quick that, like, yes, Anakin did fall, but I think Anakin's peak strength was when he was just barely using the dark side during the Clone Wars and wasn't fully consumed yet. He was very powerful. Now, he absolutely succumbed to it after not that long, but there was a little sweet spot there for a little while where the dude was basically unstoppable. And Windu also, I mean, it's well documented that Mace Windu taps into the dark side for, his lightsaber combat. And I think that, like, it's even more than a 15% increase, honestly. I think that, like, your powers, I don't know if they double, but they become
the math
significantly more powerful.
Sure.
But, like, I get what you're saying. Like, it's only for very, like, a certain type of person can handle that.
Right. And I think that's like, it's what I hope. Here's the thing. I really hope this isn't our last time we spend time with Ventress, because Ventress to me is a perfect way of exploring those questions. I also think Ahsoka is a great way of exploring those questions. And again, it's why I still want the Ahsoka Ventress buddy show. I don't think that works in any of the canon we have right now, so I don't think we're going to get it. Which does lead me to a question. And I'm glad Aaron's not here for this.
Wait, before you ask, can I say one very, very quick thing on what you just said? Because it made me smile, Matthew, in that you think back when the Clone Wars first started, Asajj Ventress and Ahsoka were the two most hated characters by the fan base. Everyone was so mad that these two like female characters were like taking lead roles. And I was so confused. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why would you be mad about this? These guys are amazing. These people are badass. And now they're like some of the most beloved characters. And I think it took the fan base at the time growing up to like become more vocal. But it just warms my heart to see how much love that both of those characters are getting and how like their journeys have become such an epitome of what it means to be like, you know, a force user kind of, you know, on their own path.
I will push back a little in that okay. I don't think it was that, like, your general idea 100% agree with. I don't think that most of the fan base didn't like those two characters. I think a small, misogynistic, but very loud and much more internet connected than most of the rest of us at that point. Yeah, but yeah, your general
there was idea, a lot of my point was there was a lot of hate going around about them. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like, I think that now that the generation who grew up with it is like a bit older and more vocal, yes.
Right. And I think the same people who are mad about that, now they say they love Ahsoka and Ventress, and now they're mad about the Acolyte trailer, or they're mad about Rey. So it's just
or they're mad about Rey or
haters, the same hating, etc.
Yes, you're right.
But here's my question.
Yes.
And without talking about the actual details, but I'm just going to say that you know, here I'm just let's hold this question. We're going to put a spoiler section of other things from the Dark Disciple.
Okay.
I'll ask a question at the end. What else about this episode do you want to talk about?
Yeah, you know, I'm just going to step back from Ventress for a minute. Well, actually, I keep saying that. One final thing on Ventress, and I actually want to talk about Omega for a minute, but something that I'm curious what you thought of, because it actually made me think of you when I heard it. When Ventress said the line, you know, your blood doesn't make you a Jedi. You know, it's about training. Like, did that help in any way with this whole M count thing, or do you think it was just like I don't know, like, how did you feel about that? Because to me it felt like Asajj was saying like it doesn't matter what your blood is, it matters like how you're trained. But I don't know if that really, you know, helps with the midichlorian concept or not.
It does somewhat, but I would need them to explain it further. Because like there's an old saying by an NBA coach, I forget, maybe a college coach, I don't know, some famous basketball coach said, like, look, there's a lot of important skills that you can learn to be a basketball player, but you can't teach tall. Some people are just tall, you know? And like, with very rare exceptions, and I grew up watching Spud Webb, he was amazing, but with very rare exceptions, if you are 5'2", it's going to be very, very hard for you to develop the skills to be a basketball player. If you're 7 foot tall, you have to work hard still, and like, you know, but like being 7 foot tall plus all that training can make you a great basketball player.
Fair.
So if what she is saying is that having a high midichlorian count means that you have a higher propensity towards the Force, but that lots of people with high midichlorian counts don't become good Force users, and that people with low midichlorian counts can still become Force users because of their will or their character or something like that, I'm all for it.
Yeah, fair.
If what she means is that the only people who can become good Force users are people who have a high midichlorian count, but that you need that plus all the training and skill,
fair,
then that would feel very different to me.
Fair. That's totally fair. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But finally, back up from Ventress.
Let me actually say one more thing on that, which is just a
we
whole
love Ventress.
Well, it's a whole other theory that I want to maybe talk about.
Please, yeah.
If we at some point do go into this idea, and they really just state it flat out, that genetics is a great way to become a really strong Jedi. You know, as is proven by Anakin's children both being very Force sensitive. If that's true across the board, and not just because he's the chosen one, then that means that the discussion of why Jedi aren't supposed to have attachments, which means romantic partners, which means some sexual partners, which often means kids, right? That now becomes a very different discussion.
Whoa! Did you just think of that right now?
No, I've had that thought in my head for a while.
Oh, okay, that's still crazy. I never thought about that. So like, it goes beyond the attachment to the dark side, but also that you don't want like force sensitive children just popping up all over the place, basically.
Well, or that you just don't want the people who are already force sensitive to be having their own kids, because then like their loyalty is more to this particular Jedi as a Padawan, and like how do you
Mm,
do all that? Plus,
mm.
just the like, if Jedi becomes a generational thing, then at some point does it basically just become its own race? And that
And
is like,
like,
and now the Jedi are even more separated from the rest. Like, I think there's lots of reasons why the Jedi might say M count is heretical,
right.
is genetic, and so therefore we Jedi should avoid, basically like a, because I will say that like, um, I believe there were some EU books where there were literally like Sith breeding programs.
I was gonna say that like their their line of thinking can lead to like the Jedi eventually having come, if the Jedi had not been, destroyed by the Sith like they were, the Order was so strong, being like, well, we're only going to train Jedi born within the temple. And so, like, we're going to have literal, like, breeding programs in the temple. Like, you can only mate with other Jedi. And, like, I don't know, like, the level of control there, I can go down such a dangerous path.
Yeah.
Um,
If anyone's watched Dune, that's basically what the
mhm,
Bene Gesserit are all about. So,
mhm.
all right, that might be a whole other episode because that's be
Oh,
fascinating to
that's
talk about.
crazy. That's crazy.
Let's talk about Omega.
Let's talk about Omega. Yeah. As the episode began, I realized I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but the reason I think she's so tight with Batcher is definitely like she has the same kind of force sensitivity to animals that Ezra does.
Yeah.
Like that, that like, obviously Ventress showed it as well. But I want to like note that I don't think that that's like an every force user thing. I think every force user can connect with other living beings, but I think to like have a special connection to animals was like more of a specialty, like kind of like
Right.
Cal Kestis and oh my god, I can never remember his name. The Jedi in Dark Disciple.
Let's not get into that. I don't want to
Okay, but
spoil that. But
him, and and Cal Kestis can like touch things, and they can see their past
mhm.
and their histories, and Ezra can reach out to animals and connect with them. I think Omega has that same ability.
Well, but remember, it's not that strong because she wasn't. That was one of the tests that Ventress put her through that she failed.
But I think that, like, to be fair, Ezra was struggling with that too when he was like when Kanan was like, you have to connect with this animal. Like it took
Right.
immense pressure for her to do that. I think that like Ezra was doing it kind of just here and there, like when he felt the connection with the Loth cats. And I think that like, like her starting on something small, Omega with Batcher makes
Yeah.
sense. And I feel like it could lead to her being able to help. And it might even be foreshadowing this episode for like, when they're back on Tantis, one of the large animals that chases them in the jungle, Omega steps forward and like is able to use that ability in that moment to save the Bad Batch from that animal by like being like, no, wait, don't shoot him. Like I can help, and like doing
Oh,
that same thing.
it is 100% Chekhov's animal sensitivity. Like totally with you on that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're right. You're right because also like Ventress said she didn't pass the test when really she kind of did. So it may be that that was an impossible level of the test.
Yeah, and I
Something like
think that
that.
like Ventress could sense, what was going on, and
Yeah.
like, just she didn't want Omega to know, and it was cool to see like Ventress protecting her. But I do think
Mm-hmm.
Omega. I mean, I'm curious how or why the Kaminoans made Omega. Like, did they see cracks, the cracks forming, like wanted to create force sensitive clones to protect themselves? Was it just pure experimental curiosity? Was it a freaking accident? Like, how did they get? How did they get Jedi blood? Was Dooku providing Jedi blood? Like, was this
Right.
plan to clone Force users? Like something Palpatine had in mind 10, 15 years ago when he first put out Dooku to order these
Right.
clones? Like, I don't know. I'm curious
Well,
now,
especially
really.
because like my first thought would be, of course, Palpatine planned this. It was always part of the plan. But then remember, the Empire doesn't know this
Right.
about Omega,
Right.
and it may be that the Empire ordered them to do some of these experiments, but they just didn't know exactly who they had done it with and how. Um, so
Well,
there's a
I mean,
lot there to explore.
they did specifically save dude, I can't remember names today. The Kaminoan doctor who was tight with Omega, who's trapped on Tantus. What's her name?
Yeah, we need Aaron. We're terrible at names.
Okay, we're terrible with names. Her, not Tanwi, the other one. But she specifically was singled out. And like, I know that she was like a lead scientist there, but like, why not bring a couple more Kaminoans? Like, why only that one? And maybe it's because she was specifically assigned. And like, we did see her in the Clone Wars. I'm pretty sure she's the same one who like was hiding, the stuff from the Jedi, if I'm not mistaken. And so like she seemed to have a little more knowledge, and like the ear of the Prime Minister. So like maybe she was put in charge of this like force sensitive testing, but like she succeeded, got attached to Omega, and didn't want to like tell anyone. But it's just strange to me that like we only know of, one force sensitive clone, and we have no idea how she was made. The Empire doesn't know she exists. But they're testing all the clones' blood. So maybe they do believe one had been made. So it would lead you to believe that they did order it at some point and are just trying to figure out who it is, maybe?
Right. Or Mega, I think Nalise or something like that.
Namaste, that's it. Yeah.
Namaste. I think it is entirely possible that maybe like she was ordered to try this out, but then she reported that none of it worked, that no clones were able to be grown. So I don't want to go too deep on the speculation there, but I think it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, just interesting.
I think it's time to start that spoiler section we're going to do. I also want to say that for those of you, do stick around for the bonus content, because in that we're going to give you about 10 minutes of that Dark Disciple episode. Just give you kind of a taste of what kind of happens in the bonus episodes and stuff like that, and why it's a great idea to become a member. $5 a month, $55 a year. Please think about doing so. But so we're going to be spoiling pretty much everything from that book in 3, 2, 1. Here's my question. In the book, we have this wonderful plot of a romance between Ventress and Voss, Quinlan Voss.
Quinlan Voss was his name.
And, she basically tries to help him. She says to him, kind of what you're saying, like, you need to tap into the dark side in order to be powerful enough. But he goes too far, and he winds up being completely consumed by it, but then eventually coming back. And they've said they're going to honor the story of Dark Disciple. I think what they mean is that all that is in the past, and yet somehow she is still alive, even though she died in that book.
Right.
But what if the spinoff we're going to get, we're going to take out the romance. It's going to be a different kind of relationship. But Asajj Ventress is going to teach new Force user Omega how to tap into the dark side, so the two of them can kill Palpatine.
And then they fail on that venture. That would be crazy, dude. Well, we know for a fact, we know Quinlan's alive. And so like they don't even really, I don't know if they're going to even bring him into this at all. Like it might literally just be like you said, it's all in the past. And we just focus on Ventress now. And that would be crazy though, because Omega clearly does not fear the Emperor. She was like, let's steal his shuttle in like the first episode. She's like, let's go. And if she believes that like that is the key to freeing her brothers, I think she'd be down for it. But like, I don't know, man. Can you picture seeing Omega evil? Like even tap into evil? She's so innocent.
I'm going to ask Erin to record a reaction video to this, because I think she's going to have some very strong feelings about this.
She'd be so mad at us.
I think you'd have to do it like 5 years later, so Omega isn't quite so much of a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could get really dark. And I would love that. And most people who love, like, I love the character of Omega, don't get me wrong. But I think enough of I think it'd be kind of like, I think if you take, I think Omega has, like, there's not the marketing, there's not the merch, it's not on as big a scale, but to the fans, I think Omega now is holding a very similar place that Grogu does. And every now and then I point out, like, Kylo Ren probably kills Grogu or something like that.
Yeah, listen, we don't know that.
But he's not showing up. So, like, I don't think Omega makes it to the Battle of Yavin. But maybe she does. I could be totally wrong. I don't think they will go there. I think that would be way too dark, but I would freaking love that.
To be fair, Omega is can't be that much younger. I mean, maybe a couple years younger than Ezra in the beginning of Rebels. And we see him go down a little bit of a dark path for a while.
Well, it's a literal for 15th birthday. I think she's still like 12.
Okay, so 3 years. I mean, is it that much of a difference? And like, remember, clones age twice as fast. So like, another year should basically be the same age as Ezra was, or 2 years when he was dipping into the dark side. And so I think it's definitely in the realm of possibility. And I think that if you say, like, you're saying that, like, basically instead of the romance you get with Quinlan, instead of all of that, it's more along the lines of, now we're seeing the same kind of teachings, but to Omega instead. I mean, that would be that'd be very interesting. And I think Omega does have like the grounding to withstand that kind of training, because she said, like, I never gave up on you, Crosshair, and she's always willing to give people a chance, and she's very like grounded and trusting. And so I could definitely see her, like, I could see that happening.
Yeah,
That would be kind of, because I mean, I kind of like want a show with Ventress and Omega now. And like, I know that, like, again, I'm sorry, Aaron, that, like, it would mean tearing apart the family, like Omega would be taken away. But like, it also, like, in my headcanon, like, the Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair, even if like one more of them die, like, or if all three of them live, them and Echo living to the Battle of Yavin is more plausible to me, because like, you can hide like soldiers in any ship or anything. It's not doing anything crazy. They're not going to greatly tip the balance of power that much, versus like a force sensitive individual outside of Luke Skywalker would throw the whole story into chaos.
Yeah, I think it's true.
So I think that true. Like, them splitting up and the clones, going along with whatever path they want to take, whether it's with the rebellion, Saw Gerrera, if they're on their own little thing, like Rex does his own little thing, like, that's more viable to me. Something has to happen with Omega and Ventress, because it just doesn't, like you said, like, I mean, I don't know, where have they been this whole time?
Yeah, so we'll see. All right, any last comments you want to make? I think it's about time to wrap up.
I don't think so. I'm just excited to see where the show goes now. I think that there's one, I'm not going to say who it is for those who haven't seen the trailer, but there's one character we saw briefly in the trailer we haven't seen yet. But besides that, I think it's really all new content. We have no idea. We know we're going to go after Tantus at some point, presumably, but I have no idea what's coming in the next episode at all.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So that's exciting.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex. As always, for our fans, thank you so much. If you're watching on screen, there's now a couple of ways to contact us. You can also find all the ways in the show notes. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you think about the episode, about episodes coming up, about any of the crazy theories that Alex and I were batting around. Mostly I'm the one going off the mostly I'm the one going kind of way into the deep end, and Alex is helping to pull me back. But let us know what you think. Of course, again, I hate to keep pushing it, folks, but just if you have a member, $5 a month, it really helps out so much. And we really are going to be trying to make so much more content for you, for those members. So stick around to hear a little bit of the Dark Disciple episode that we did. Thank you all so much. We have said things.
Stay classy. You do.
You do.
I do.
Do what? The magic of the Grogu.
But it was a good book, and my understanding is that it was based on a plot that was supposed to be in Clone Wars season 7, right? The new season. And then they just didn't have space for it and dropped it, but then they're like, hey, can we turn it into a novel? So they did. And it's supposed to be canon, and we're going to get to like a big thing, right, about it, that a spoilery thing. So when the Bad Batch Season 3 trailer was released, many of us were confused, I think. And I'm even more confused now because you just said that they are incorporating a storyline from it into Bad Batch Season 3?
We'll get to that.
We'll get to
that.
Okay.
We know very little. And just to clarify one thing, so my understanding of it, Katie Lucas, who's George Lucas's daughter, has a beautiful little foreword at the start of the book where she explains her sort of connection, how she was like hanging out on the set of the prequels as a she was hanging out on the set of the prequels as a PA when she was like a teenager. Apparently, her brother got to play a Jedi in the Attack of the Clones, which I think is super cute. And at some point, she started writing for the show.
Yeah.
And she wrote some episodes that were part of what was going to be the original season 7, or even maybe the original season 6 for the Clone Wars, that were going to be this storyline of the Dark Disciple. In part because she talked about how she absolutely loved the character of Asajj Ventress, and she talked about how she was going through a bad breakup at the time. I think she was in her mid-20s at this point, and writing the story was very cathartic for her. But then because Bad Batch got canceled, a lot of these episodes either never got shot or never got produced, and certainly never got aired. And then later, when they decided to bring back season 7, this was just not one of the episodes that was ever incorporated. So just wanted to kind of like go a little deeper on that, because you're right, it's kind of a fun backstory to them.
Yeah, and Katie Lucas, like I remember seeing her name in the Clone Wars with writing credits.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we could say like she's a nepo baby or whatever, but when you literally grow up in the house, you know, the house that created Star Wars, and you are involved in it like that from a young age, like I think it's a little different from like the son or daughter of an actor becoming, you know, someone. Like that she grew up with this, like in her house, like probably talking to her dad about it, and then became involved.
No one ever calls Brian Henson a nepo baby. He's been the voice of Kermit the Frog for 20 years since his father Jim Henson passed away. You know?
I see it more like an athlete, right? Like an athlete who grows up in a household where the father is a professional athlete. Like you're gonna have that connection, and obviously, like you have to display the skills to actually also make it to the professional leagues. And I believe she earned that. So she had an advantage, right? Like literally her father could be like, hey, like come over here and like help me with this project.
Yeah.
But I think she's earned everything that she's been involved in through her story.
I agree with that. Alex, what's your intro and your connection to this book?
I'd wanted to read Dark Disciple for a while because as a huge fan of Clone Wars, I've read all about like, you know, this lost arc between Quinlan and Asajj, and I really enjoyed Asajj Ventress. Was one of my favorite characters in the Clone Wars. I liked the little bit of Quinlan Voss we did get when he ran around with Obi-Wan on Nal Hutta. And so I was like, you know, I went into this not really knowing what to expect. I just expected like some sort of adventure with Ventress and Quinlan. I was like, maybe Asajj, like this is how she like, you know, goes more to the light side. I don't know. I was not expecting what I got. I was not expecting the steamy sexiness of this book, and some of it looked really powerful. Like we'll get into more detail, but like some of the really powerful imagery of the dark side and how one falls to the dark side that I think gave me better understanding, more context of like probably how Anakin felt during his fall, which I thought was kind of cool. So I felt like the book was really fun. But the biggest thing for me was that I saw the trailer for the Bad Batch before I read this. So in the trailer, I see Asajj Ventress. I had no idea, y'all, that she. Can I say this early now, or should I wait?
Yeah, let's give that last warning.
Okay, I'll wait.
We're gonna have a spoiler warning. After this point, you'll be spoiled on the plot of Dark Disciple, which may be a spoiler point for the Bad Batch TV show. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. That was just a taste of what the members get in the bonus member episodes. We did a whole episode on that book that is going to be very relevant to the rest of Ahsoka. If you're already a member, you should be able to find it in your feed. Definitely go back and check it out. It's under the Star Wars Generations Book Club, Dark Disciple. If you have any trouble finding it, let us know. And if you're not a member, you want to hear more, very easy. Just go to www.theethicalpanda.com. $5 a month, $55 a year. You support us, you get bonus content, and you get bonus member episodes. Thank you so much. We have spoken.